Before we begin, I wanted to give a huge shout out to the folks at Amazon Music for partnering with us on this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast. But more on this later. Right then, let's get right into today's episode. To follow up from an epic week of sport, we have the Hungarian GP, which is going to be a landmark moment in this season because after that, we have to wait. There's going to be a bit of a summer break, and that kind of sucks. But at least we come to this race with so much sporting goodness. We've seen Carlos Alcaraz win at Wimbledon. We've seen the Indian cricket team win the Cricket World Cup, and Ravi Shastri appear on the Inside Line F1 podcast to talk more about that and his love for Formula One. And after that, we see Spain also winning the Euros. But interestingly, the last two times that Spain has won a major international football tournament, guess who was the race winner? This wasn't planned, by the way. So both Kunal and Sundaram are going to be confused. So who's going to answer this one? Okay.
I'd like to bet Fernando Alonso.
He was on
Not
pole
really sure.
once, but the winner in both cases was an Aussie. And that is why I am going to puff my chest proudly because my second favorite driver on the entire grid is best poised to win this weekend, and I am not listening to anything else. Yes, Carlos Sainz is always number one, but if you've been listening to the Inside Line F1 podcast lately, you know how badly I'm betting on an Oscar Piastri win. And I suppose, Kunal, it's possibly the best chance for McLaren to get back in, right? Because last weekend, they should have won, they could have won, but yet again, as the story is always there, they didn't.
They didn't. And some stats which actually also aid further. So I can't top up your stat, okay, about who won the Euros and who sort
It
of
was
went.
Mark Webber, by the way.
Of
It was Mark
course.
Webber.
Yeah, I mean, just because you say Aussie, it could also be Daniel Ricciardo. But Mark Webber, who, of course, manages Oscar Piastri's career, who managed Oscar not joining Alpine and joining McLaren as he did last year. But also, I think there are 5 drivers who actually scored their first wins in Hungaroring. So not the highest circuit in terms of maiden victories, as Sundaram pointed out last night when we were preparing. But we had Damon Hill, Fernando Alonso, Jenson Button, 3 former world champions who scored their first wins here. Heikki Kovalainen, who scored his only win for McLaren in 2008, which was also courtesy of Felipe Massa not finishing that race. And then Esteban Ocon, who won here in 2021, the race where Lewis Hamilton was the only driver on the start grid. And then, of course, we had that Alonso Hamilton masterclass, which allowed Esteban to finally go ahead and score his only race win.
The one where Alonso defended like a lion.
Which race has he not defended like a lion? Maybe only races where Lance Stroll has come chasing him down.
And he's now got to defend his reputation and legacy like a lion too, because the results are nothing to be proudly talking home about. But we're not going to rain down on the Aston Martin parade that early. We will get to it for sure. But guys, the statistics here really tell a big story. How many times has Mercedes been on pole here, Sundaram, lately? It's quite a number, isn't it?
Last week, I knew we were going to see something special at Silverstone because of Lewis Hamilton's record over there, and it actually came true. So this is another weekend where I'm probably going to, keep my fingers crossed for a Mercedes masterclass, because the last 11 races at the Hungaroring, Mercedes have been on pole 9 times. The last 2 years, so last year we had Lewis Hamilton on pole. The year before it was George Russell. And both of those races, they didn't go on to win that. That's a different story altogether. But you can expect Mercedes to do especially well here. Also, another stat, Lewis Hamilton has the most wins at a single circuit. That was Silverstone, 9. But he has the most poles at one circuit, which is at the Hungaroring, which is 9.
Ooh.
So two tracks where he does particularly very well. So I wouldn't say it's completely out of the window to kind of predict a Mercedes 3 in a row. I wouldn't say that's a very bad bet.
Should we call Mr. Shastri, Kunal? He seems to be the lucky charm now.
I mean, last year Lewis Hamilton actually had pole by 0.003 of a second. 2022 pole was decided by 0.044. So it's been less than a tenth. And of course, 0.44, of course, 44 being Lewis Hamilton's number, which is why Sundaram's eyes lit up. But qualifying is ever essential. I think the Saturday will entertain us irrespective of how the Sunday goes. Although I know Somil told me that last year Max Verstappen won here by 30 seconds. But this will be a great, yet another great indicator, I would say, of how much the others have caught up. Because yes, they've always been around in qualifying, but on the Sunday, Max is just able to pull off that gap and then keep building on that gap over, for example, the 70 laps in Hungary. In fact, I remember 2022, wasn't it? Somil, he spun and then he still went on to win. And that was the title of the podcast we did then. Max spins and wins in Hungary. That's the kind of advantage they've had in Hungary before. That's the kind of advantage they've had pretty much in all the races. I'm excited to see what happens now, because the last 4 races, the pole sitter hasn't gone on to win that race. And I think that's great to see rules converging, performance converging finally in this era of Formula One.
And to tell you a story of how far we've come since last year, which we ought to every single weekend, right? Since it's such a dramatic shift. At this race last year, Lando Norris was so happy finishing second that he broke Max Verstappen's trophy. I don't think that's going to happen this year, though, because the expectations have changed. If anything, a trophy is only going to be broken out of frustration if Lando finishes second again. And this time out, right, I find it interesting how McLaren still don't favor themselves as the favorites. And particularly this weekend, I strongly believe that for McLaren to win, the focus has to be on how sharp they are in strategy. Because now they have a car that genuinely works in all scenarios. Monaco, which is, I wouldn't say the most comparable circuit to the Hungaroring, but somewhat in a similar bracket. McLaren were really good, and they should have won that race had it not been for a slightly messed up qualifying lap by my dear favorite, Oscar Piastri. But in that regard now, I find it funny, Kunal. Last year, Andrea Stella, after the Hungaroring, where they had P2, courtesy of Lando Norris, he said that going into Spa, we are still going to struggle in the slower speed corners and the traction zones because that's where our car is not very good. Fast forward a year, and McLaren are genuinely one of the better cars over there. And once again, the story remains the same. The car is there. Can they match it up with operational excellence and the well-managed term that GP loves to say to Max Verstappen?
I'm going to actually flip that question around. Okay, there will be that one race when McLaren suddenly would have turned it around, and we'll all sit up and take notice and say, wow, they actually executed that race perfectly. Qualifying, they've actually been executing qualifying brilliantly. They are the only team with both cars in Q3 in all the races. It's going to be that one race where they realize, you know what? We're not going to get these chances often. We genuinely have a quick car. We have to take those chances when they come. And, Zach Brown has been making all these statements, which I don't sort of agree with. I think he's a great business person, but he should probably leave the sporting prowess to Andrea Stella, which he has done so. But he said, we're not going to win like Red Bull. We are not going to win, there was a word he used. He's saying win at all costs. But the truth is, you have to be ruthless in Formula One. You have to want to win at all cost. And that doesn't mean you cheat, of course. But what that means is you're always ready to claim a win when it comes your way. In McLaren's case, it's been the other way, that when a win has come their way, they've been like, oh my God, we're going to win. It's too soon. We're not supposed to win too soon. We'll wait another race. And then, somebody else has pounced and taken on that victory. So I'm waiting to see if this is going to be that race where they pounce on and they're like, you know what, we are so operationally brilliant. Few races that we took to learn, we've actually learned. And we were quick around Monaco. This is Monaco without the walls. So we should be quick here, because I don't think Ferrari is going to be quick here. They were quick in Monaco, but they've had those upgrades which have sort of taken drivability away from them. So I would definitely bet on McLaren being right there, because there was one team that actually struggles on street circuits, Singapore, Monaco included, and that's Red Bull Racing. The minute they have to go lower on that floor, or they have to go lower to extract performance from that floor, and there are these bumps and curbs they have to ride, they suddenly get unsettled. So Monaco without the walls is where I'm expecting McLaren to bounce back. And Here's an interesting fact, actually, while I was doing my research. We call it Monaco without the walls, right? Why? Of course, everyone will say it's because, it is tight and twisty, low to medium speed corners, all of them flowing, hardly a straight out there. The only difference is in Monaco, you literally have the walls. In Hungaroring, the walls are just after the gravel or whatever. But interestingly, when you go back in history, they actually designed the Hungaroring to mimic the circuit of Monaco.
And
I literally figured that this year. Okay.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, I didn't know they were going to design. No, I didn't know. I knew this was Monaco without the walls from a technical point of view. Bring the Monaco upgrades or Monaco levels of downforce and Monaco levels of cooling and braking. I knew that. But I didn't know that the designers were out to mimic the layout of Monaco. I was today years old, as we say in this social media generation.
It's if that's if what's the name of that actress? It's a very Margot Robbie and Emma Mackey kind of thing, where you're trying to make a Margot Robbie and you get with an Emma Mackey. It's not the same. I get the idea, but it's a very second or third copy. Even though Emma Mackey is brilliant, but it's just not the same.
I have no clue who these people are, so I'm going to just pretend like.
Have you not watched Barbie?
That's a very good reference, because just yesterday I was watching a movie where nearly 75 minutes into it, I was convinced I was watching a movie with Margot Robbie in it. And towards the last probably 20 minutes is when I realized this is not Margot Robbie, this is Emma Mackey. So very, very good. On point.
Or Jamie Presley as well, because she looked exactly the same. I don't know. It's all a little bit. But wait, have you not watched Barbie, Kunal? Seriously?
I wouldn't ever watch it. You pay me to watch it, I'll still not watch it.
Oh man! But wait,
having said that, I probably watched 20 movies in the last 10 years, so maybe even less. I'm not a movie person.
One of them has to be Wolf of Wall Street, right? That was a good one.
Yeah, I saw that.
And she was in that. That's the one.
I just know Leonardo DiCaprio was there. But either way.
Well, it's not going to be as glamorous this weekend with all the stars, because clearly nobody likes to come to the Hungaroring, right, comparatively. But a lot of fans love to go there. It should be. Exactly.
It's Hungary. It's Budapest. It's one of the best cities in Europe.
Best place to party, one of the calmest cities to be in, and the circuit's not too far off. The tickets are dirt cheap, and the viewpoints. There's literally a water park behind the second to third sector where you can go and chill at that weekend. Rent out a house, get a campsite or something, and just enjoy the racing. And because it's shaped like a bowl, as a spectator, you can literally watch everything. It's like a little scale electrics race happening right before your eyes. It's one of the best places to go watch a Formula One race.
Kevin Magnussen and Esteban Ocon have long called this a go-kart circuit with Formula One cars on it. Okay. And your description actually matches that. And I love such kind of circuits. Drivers are always busy, changing direction, often 180 degrees. I think there are 6 lefts and 8 right-handers. It's one of those things. Very, very beautiful. I love the last corner. You literally can follow somebody on their gearbox. The good old way, instead of waiting 1 second behind and then waiting to flick on that DRS wing, you can follow somebody through that last corner on the gearbox, out accelerate them, take that, slipstream down to turn 1, turn 3, 4, 5 again, beautiful 5, that left-hander that we've got, that you were salivating on that when I was talking about it.
It's so good. It's so good.
But
that's a very good point that you mentioned, Kunal, because you said cars leaving the last corner one behind each other. And there's also a strategic angle to it, because Hungaroring is one of those few circuits where you have more DRS zones than detection points.
Ooh.
So if you are within DRS, you're within the DRS distance between the car head, you get DRS on the main straight and also after turn 1 into the next corner. So it's something we saw in Australia. It's something we see in Bahrain off lately. So that's one of the strategic things that drivers might want to do if they can get the hairpin just before that. They can execute that perfectly.
Wow.
And if they can survive the dirty air there, because that corner is a long one. But hey, we need to talk about long corners. We need to talk about weather. Wait, are we all 50-year-old uncles over a cup of tea talking about Formula One? It kind of feels like that sometime, but we'll get to that. But we're not just all 50-year-old uncles talking about Formula One. We'll tell you who we are in a second. This is the Inside Line F1 podcast, and I've got to practice this because I always mess it up because it's so new. We've been awarded India's best sports podcast recently. We're one of the top 1.5% of all sports, not all sports podcasts, all podcasts in the world on Spotify. There we are. I knew I was going to make a small mistake.
Not just Spotify. I'm going to correct you again. Across all listening apps.
I'm overwhelmed. I am overwhelmed. But the reason for that is because it's all happening so quickly, and it's all thanks to your support. So thank you for coming in to listen to us. And that's who we are. My name is Somil Arora. I'm a sports commentator and presenter. I've been commentating over the MotoGP Indian Grand Prix, the Indian Supercross Racing League, the Indian Racing League, you name it, and any other racing championship in India. I've probably been around and worked on that. Kunal has been the former marketing head of the Force India Formula One team, which, if I recall correctly, did they ever get a pole here? No, that was Spa, wasn't it?
That was Spa.
That was Spa. Yeah. But Force India was a pretty good team at that time. But Kunal's main involvement at that time was the marketing side. But now he is an F1 producer and panelist as well for the Viaplay network in Norway. And who, of course, doesn't know F1 Stats Guru, one of the most followed stats pages on the internet, regardless of the sport. And his stats have been used by so many big people in the industry. Websites like autosport.com, motorsport.com, David Croft in the Sky Commentary Box, and so many others. That's the three of us. And the three of us are going to talk about weather. What's it like in Oslo, Kunal? It must be cold, right?
This is Norwegian. This is Norwegian summer. It's 15 degrees right now. Which is pretty warm, I would say, for Oslo. I mean, if you're wearing just single layers, that's good. It's been a bit of rain on and off, but yeah, it's like pretty cool. And we wait for the warm days or you fly to where the warm days come.
Which is going to be Hungary this time because 33 degrees Celsius, Sundaram. Yeah, that's going to be the weather. And for context, at the British GP, the maximum it went to was around 19, 21 degrees at best.
That's one of the key things we're going to be looking forward to this weekend. And it's taken a while for me to realize when was the last warm or hot Grand Prix that we've had in recent races. And I can't seem to put a finger to it quickly enough. But apart from the fact that this weekend the weather is going to be hot, there's probably no probability of rain coming. It's also how teams and drivers can manage their car from overheating, especially the brakes. There are so many braking points, and the fact that there are so few straights, it puts a lot of heat through their brakes, and there's very limited airflow that can go through those sections. So you will often see drivers lifting and coasting on the main straight or another section so that they don't put a lot of pressure on the brakes. And tire wear is also anything that's going to be spoken about because of that heat. Pirelli's gone in with the softest compounds, so you'd most likely see teams go using the mediums and the hards instead rather than the softs. But who manages their tires the best is also going to be a key question. Who has the fewest tire degradation? So I really can't put a finger on which one team has an advantage right now. I think it's all even Stevens right now. And like Kunal mentioned, I really want to see if Red Bull's suspension problems creep up around this particular track, because there is one corner, especially where they really have to ride the curbs. Otherwise, they have to go around it and lose some time, which was what happened in Monaco as well for Verstappen. So I'm very, very interested to see how Verstappen in specific performs around here.
That's a great point, and I'm gonna come to you on this, Kunal, because as a driver, right, knowing that your car doesn't perform very well in a certain scenario means you have to adapt your driving around it. For Red Bull, that's what Max did at Monaco unsuccessfully because the car just wasn't quick enough in that regard. But at Hungaroring, where a lot of places you just have to chuck the car in and hope for the best, and then there are some places where you've got to conserve the tires. And because they're longer corners, right? So you want to make sure you chew less of them. And then there's that one nasty little chicane, which to be fast over, you have to cut the corner. For Max, it's going to be such a particular challenge this weekend.
I mean, I believe he's been challenged this season already. Because if you remember, the first 7 races, he had poles, and he's the only driver with multiple race wins and so on. But in the last 5 races, he's had just one pole position. The the going has been tough ever since Red Bull has brought these upgrades. But if there's any driver who's adapted to the car, much as there are several others, but in this case, Max Verstappen, if we see the performance out of that Red Bull package over the years, over multiple regulatory eras, have been, you have to extract that performance in very particular ways, which only Max Verstappen actually has been able to sort of pull out. That's the reason why we see the likes of Perez and Albon and Gasly who have struggled, because Max is able to drive to where that car is able to go quick, and that's what he'll find his ways to either get a backache every day and ride those curbs, or not ride those curbs but make up time elsewhere around the circuit. And while you all, of course, say Max is where all the eyes are, the eyes definitely are even more so on Checo Perez, because now more than ever, I mean, every season by the time we've gotten to the summer break, everyone's been like, oh, he's faded away, he's not done well, what's next for Checo? And then what's next for Checo has led to him not winning, him not beating Max. I think it's been 30 sessions that he's not beaten Max Verstappen in qualifying. And then,
Only?
And then, it's typical. He's had a strong start to the season. He's had podium places, whatever. And then the minute everybody else sort of came through in the last 6 races, including the sprint, Perez has scored just 15 points in total, whereas Max has picked up 119 points. Okay. So he's got that contract extension for 2 years. But he's also got these performance clauses, which, of course, have been, I would say, falsely rumored to be 100 points away only from Max by the time you hit Belgium, because it was that last year. He was already more than 100 points away by the time we hit Belgium. So it's not going to be the clauses that are rumored. It's going to be something else that will, crack that puzzle of what Red Bull should do, if not stick with Checo Perez, because at this rate, they are going to lose Constructors' Championship come Abu Dhabi, even if they are definitely going to win the Drivers' Championship come Abu Dhabi.
But wait, you had some really interesting stats on Checo and Red Bull Racing, Sundaram, because their record here isn't really the best now, is it?
I think I've been putting a lot of Perez stats right now that I feel I'm getting a little exhausted from doing this, and probably the Mexican fans are going to start hating me. Please don't hate me. I'm bound to do this, but Sergio Perez has not qualified higher than 4th at the Hungaroring. I don't think so that means as much considering his recent form. He really needs a good outing. But where he stands in the standings is a bit of a concern. He's at 137 points away from Verstappen, and that's the biggest gap he's had ever since he's joined Red Bull compared to Verstappen after 12 races. And he's the only driver from the top 4 teams to not win in the last 7 rounds. And I was actually going back into Perez's performance with Red Bull. He's actually finished outside the points on 5 occasions ever since he's joined Red Bull. Max Verstappen has finished outside the points only once since he's joined Red Bull back in 2016. Oof. So that's a huge contrast over the last 3 years compared to the last 6-7 years. It also shows the sort of level these two drivers are operating at. But if I was a Red Bull driver, I wouldn't really care putting my car on pole position, because no Red Bull driver has converted pole position to a win at the Hungaroring.
No way.
So it's not that much of a worry. Verstappen's won from P10 here, he's won from P2, add a spin along with it. So I think he's fine.
But qualifying is going to be crazy here, because as you mentioned, even though the pole sitter for Red Bull Racing hasn't quite won here very often, generally this circuit has to be one of the tougher ones to pass. For that, I mean, you've just got to look at the battles that we've had last year and the year before that. We saw Alonso versus Hamilton in 21. We saw Hamilton versus Verstappen last year. And as you mentioned, Sundaram, only 3 Hungarian GPs in the hybrid era have been won by the pole sitter. But passing here has to be the toughest thing. I mean, where do you do that? The straights are not that long, and there's only one of them, really, technically. And the corners where you can really go and hang it around the outside very quickly turn into different corners. Like an example I can think of, turn number 1. You feel there is space on the outside, but the moment you feel that the space is starting to expand, it suddenly contracts and you get back into that straight of sorts. before you then have another long left-hander. And that's only really the proper pace to pass. And otherwise, you're just trailing along, hoping for the best, hoping that the dirty air doesn't quite cause you to lose as much time. So the psychology of racing is going to be so good here. And in terms of just the battling, I don't think it's just going to be very clearly what happens on the track, because this is one of those few circuits, Kunal, where we can actually get a double stopper. And do you know what happened when we had a double stopper in the late 2010s? Was it 2018 or 19, where Hamilton was just able to plot a late race masterclass and catch up to Max, who was saving his tires, but Hamilton was on the softer ones and going all out. Something of that sort could potentially happen if there are split strategies this time.
Especially with tire degradation extremely high. The Hungarian Grand Prix is a permanent circuit, but it's not used as often through the year as some of the other permanent circuits, which is why there is a lot of track evolution, but also early session graining that you see as well. So tire degradation with the heat, like Sundaram and you pointed out, is also very high. And we've seen very interestingly that Red Bull has early stint advantage with the tires. Max is able to pull out those few vital seconds early in the stint.
Yeah.
But McLaren actually bring back that advantage closer to the end of the stint. Okay, we've seen Lando Norris try to do that a couple of races ago, go longer, build that tire offset. I think that could very well be one of those things that teams will want to try, given that overtaking in general on track is difficult, especially if you're on the same or similar tire life. So having that offset in tire life will be one of those things that teams will try and build in to their strategy if the race definitely allows them to do that. And two stops is always a good thing because it throws in a lot more variability, unpredictability within a Grand Prix distance, especially if it's I wouldn't say boring, but a dry race doesn't always mean exciting if you get into saving tire management phases too early into the race. So a mixed upgrade, the opportunity to have mixed strategy is what we would be looking for this Sunday.
So that's a very good point that you made over there in terms of pit stops, because the other thing is the fact that if you make a pit stop and then you end up behind another car, that's even more reason for your brakes overheating and not having enough air reaching them. So where you finish after your pit stops is also going to be very crucial. And if it's one of the front runners, Lando Norris or Verstappen, stuck behind another car, they're not going to be very happy with that. So pit stops are going to be very, very key, very crucial here. And traction is also very important. We've often seen drivers passing on the opening straight, but then not having enough traction to complete that move into the next section of corners. So traction is also going to be a very key point through this weekend.
And especially, Monaco is one of those places where the overcut comes into play because you could be stuck behind a slower car and so on, like you pointed out. So could be Monaco without the walls. Also overcut is something that could come into play as well. So exciting. And then can Mercedes actually win 3 on the trot? Are they really in the battle? Because in Austria, they were 15 seconds behind Norris and Verstappen before they crashed. In Silverstone, in the cooler conditions, they were definitely the quickest, if not one of the quickest of the 2 cars out there. Toto Wolff has said they are bringing more upgrades to Hungary. But, we've seen classic in this era, new upgrades doesn't always mean a quicker car. Ask Ferrari and they'll tell you so. But if Mercedes is also in that battle, along with the likes of McLaren and Red Bull, then the pressure to execute things right on track, in the cockpit, and on the pit wall is only that much higher. And that's when is that much more fun for all of us.
Yeah. And it's going to be weird because in Silverstone, in the hottest part of the entire race, where you had to do the most tire management at the fastest circuit possible, Lewis Hamilton excelled. But this time out, it's going to be pure heat. There's going to be heat throughout the race. And instead of fast corners, there's going to be properly slow and long ones. And I wonder, is Mercedes still going to be the best car in the best place in this race weekend in those conditions? Because it's not Silverstone anymore. And even though their record here is very good, it's just a big question mark that we just won't have an answer to until we go racing. Just like in the case of Ferrari, which is always a big question mark. Where are they? How good are they? What are they?
And just before you switch to Ferrari, Mercedes' record, even in this era of Formula One, which is when they've struggled, I would say Hungary is one of the better places to have this record, because 2022 George Russell had pole, 2023 Lewis Hamilton has had pole. So when you think of that zero pod and half pod concept and so on, even if that didn't work across a large range of circuits, it actually worked very well for them at Hungary. So I definitely would bet on them being in the play this weekend more than Ferrari, because they just seems to have gone astray with that upgrade they had after Monaco, because Leclerc's stats after Monaco are embarrassing, as we all know. But you know what? The triple header gives you very little breathing time. You're going from one race to the other and one race to the other, and sometimes you just go to a race to race because you're contracted to go there and race. A lot of times in a lot of circuits, they say that, are you driving the car or is the car driving you? Okay, so similarly, when you don't have breathing space and you're struggling to find answers, the fortnight's gap that we've had between Silverstone and now Hungary will definitely help Ferrari regroup, hopefully find more solutions. Because if we remember back in Silverstone on Friday, they actually ran a split setup between the two drivers to try and extract more data and hopefully build on insight. So can Ferrari really come back to their whole Monaco form? Suddenly after Monaco, they were second best in the constructors, chasing down Red Bull. Leclerc was like, oh, could I have an outside chance? Or at least the media was like, can he have an outside chance in the Drivers' Championship and so on? But they've actually fallen back, and it's now McLaren and Lando Norris who have been hogging the chasing headlines.
Ferrari have been, trying something. What did he say out of the box? What did he say recently?
Out of I don't know. Did I say something?
Yeah.
He said something. Sorry, they've been trying something out of the ordinary, especially in the last couple of races as well. In Canada, Ferrari trying to be a little ambitious with a tire strategy for Charles Leclerc, and also they were forced to kind of pit. I get last time out in the British Grand Prix, but then still trying to be over ambitious on their tire choice and trying to see if they can gain a couple of places. For once, I would like to see Ferrari executing a straight race without any hiccups in strategy or being over ambitious. Stick to the pace and see what best you can make out of it.
That's a great point. One of the reasons the likes of Ferrari actually have to try different things on strategy is when you lack outright pace. Sometimes if you just drive to your pace and do your strategy as you would, you will just finish in positions that you are destined to finish in. So a lot of times when we see teams be over ambitious, it's just that they are trying to sort of cloak the lack of pace and hope that a strategy gamble plays out. Not to say that the Inter's strategy that they tried on Leclerc was the right one, waiting for the rain when it didn't sort of come. But talking of strategy, I remember in 1998 in Sommel, this is where I put on the Sommel hat, okay? Ferrari actually converted Schumacher from a 2 to a 3 stopper in Hungary. And then they went on to win that race. Okay. If they have to take inspiration from any race, it should be the 1998 Hungarian Grand Prix, when they were so sharp on that pit wall, which actually reminds me, the Hungarian Grand Prix has been around since 1986. Okay. And there are so many beautiful moments over the years that have happened. Like, we opened the podcast with Hamilton, the only car on the start line. Verstappen spinning to win. Then Schumacher squeezing Barrichello. Lots of first-time winners, as we said. In fact, the Hamilton-Alonso rivalry peaked in Hungary in 2007 as well.
Yes.
And then Max Verstappen crashed on the way to the grid during his reconnaissance laps. 2020, was it? I can't remember. And then Red Bull mechanics actually fixed his car on the start grid in record time, so he could start that race. So lots of moments. I'm sure if we sit and do what are the moments from Hungary, we'll have 15 more to pick from. But just some at the top of my head, because it's been around for so long. It's one of those classic races.
But you had a point on the Hungarian GP, Sundaram. You've noticed something interesting.
Yeah, I'm surprised not a lot of other people notice this, because when I grew up, the Hungarian Grand Prix was not called the Hungarian Grand Prix.
Yeah.
You remember what it was called back in the day?
The Magyar
Nagdi.
Yeah.
But isn't that
that's
the Hungarian name for it?
It's basically the
So
Hungarian Grand Prix, isn't it?
it's a little translation of that. It's a little translation of the Hungarian Grand Prix. I would say localization of sorts, because that's what the official race title has always been. And I checked my database. Since 1990, it was always called Magyar Nagydíj up until last
Oh,
year. And
God.
last year, when I saw the official title, it said Hungarian Grand Prix. So that's odd. I've not seen that in a long time. And this year also, it's officially called the Hungarian Grand Prix.
Wait, so did we also have the Canadian Grand Prix this year and not Grand Prix du
Now you have me
Grossier
curious.
Prize
Grosse-
something.
Yes.
Something.
Grosse Prix von Österreich? That was the Austrian.
Austrian.
Man, one second
Have
now.
they just changed all
Grand Prix du
titles to
Canada.
English?
The Americanization of the
No,
sport?
so Monaco is not Monaco Grand Prix, or Canada is not Canadian Grand Prix. Like you said, it's Grand Prix de Monaco, Grand Prix du Canada, or Grand Premio de España. So Hungary has gone back to the typical English way
Oh,
of saying
God.
it.
So was Austria, because that was always something. Anyway,
Yeah.
but wow.
Grosse Prix von Österreich. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Exactly, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Wow.
Oh,
I used to joke about this, saying if you're catering to a global audience, just have all the English names, only to then move to
Don't.
Norway to realize English names are not necessary. You should localize those names.
Exactly.
But qualifying is going to be what I'm going to be most excited about come this weekend. So I know, Samuel, you're going to ask for predictions, but what's your prediction for pole position for qualifying?
I genuinely believe this one is going to be where the difference between McLaren and Red Bull Racing is the most evident. I'm going to bank on a Max pole and win this time out. But of
Wow.
course, it's one of the hardest places to actually go and beat Red Bull Racing, if you've got to think about it. It's where you really have to optimize everything in terms of your performance. And it's not a particular mix of everything. It's really slow, longer corners. It's going to be tough, but I'm still going Max. But I want to see Oscar do a good job.
One sec. We get to this segment every time. And in these 40 odd minutes that we speak, Sundaram and I convince you to place your bets elsewhere. You started with this whole Oscar Piastri stat, and I'm backing
That's
him.
the heart. That's the heart. That's the difference, right? You start with the heart, and by the end, your mind is like, yeah, it's probably better not to listen to you.
If I follow my heart, it's going to be a different prediction altogether. So I've been not doing that for 10 years now. So let's not talk about that.
Okay, what's your prediction?
I think pole, I'm going with either Russell or Lando. And race win, either Verstappen or Lando.
Wait, not either. Pick one. Man, that's where we are nowadays.
Okay, fine, Max winning, but pole is going to be difficult.
Interesting. Where's your money at, Kunal?
My money is on a McLaren pole and a McLaren race win. And I'm on that side of what you said. The difference in performance is going to be visible to an extent where this is probably going to be one of those races where McLaren are narrowly quicker, which will make things hopefully easier for them to execute. They're not always under pressure. And that's probably where this is going to be going. So I would probably say Norris pole and a PS3 win, or the other way around. But yeah.
I knew it. I knew you were going for a Lando Norris pole and a PS3 win, and I kind of visualize what the race is going to look like. So Lando Norris starts on pole, they go for the overcut, but PS3 goes for the undercut. It works out for PS3 this time. Redemption for him. Norris once again tries the overcut and it doesn't work out, and PS3 wins.
See, I like the sound of that. I like the sound of that. That is what they should have done last time out, or at least double stacked it. But well, here we are.
But the key question, and this we have to go to Sundaram for this, for all his Fernando Alonso love, right? Will Stroll continue to outqualify Fernando Alonso?
Ooh.
It's actually very difficult. I'm being very honest here, because Stroll has had a good couple of races. I think maybe.
Wow.
Still, maybe.
We're at that stage in land.
Maybe in qualifying, not in the race. Maybe I think because Alonso generally does well around this track. But yeah, I have a feeling, I don't know where Alonso is at this point. Is it something mentally, or is he not really at one with the car? It's difficult to kind of judge at this point, but yeah, maybe it's possible Stroll could out qualify him. As much as I hate saying
The
that.
payments have not arrived.
Never ask me this question again. Never ask me this question ever again.
The payments have not arrived. No, that's the thing. Where the big signing bonus exists, that's where the performances always look great. But the moment the signing bonus starts to evaporate and you get to the normal base pay, I've seen this doesn't work out. We'll see. I mean, we're all hoping for the best for Fernando. That's what we always do.
You have to say, Sommel, what's your prediction? Will Fernando qualify ahead of Lance Stroll or the other way around?
I was doing my best to dodge it. Come on, don't bring me back in this. Okay, if I'm following my mind in one place, I'm going to follow my heart over here. I think Fernando gets the better, yeah.
Yeah, I would say so as well. I mean,
But I'm not confident. That's the thing.
I'm actually confident Fernando would have turned it around. He would have figured what's happened in the triple header. He's that wily old smart fox who's the quickest there still is. And Lance Stroll, having said that, for all the Canadian listeners who think we are anti-Lance Stroll has had a decent enough going in the race where he's actually gotten back into the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship. Something only in the first couple of rounds he was there and then he dropped out. But he's gotten back there. But let's see. It's he's out-qualified Alonso 5 times this year. And I think Alonso is just going to get the better of him at every race here on.
Well, why don't we watch the action together? Guys, we're trying to make sure that we get the Inside Line F1 pit stops back in Mumbai. And hopefully there will be one this weekend as well. So to keep updated with it, you've got to make sure that you follow us on all of our social media handles. And that would be at Inside Line F1 Podcast. And of course, all of our individual profiles as well. But it's been a good, fun episode for now. We're going to see you on Monday for the Hungarian GP review. And after that, there are a few fun guests coming on the podcast as well. So you better stay tuned with that. See you, folks. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast. Before we ended, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Amazon Music once again for partnering with us on this episode of the podcast.